Morning, everyone. Welcome to what looks to be a beautiful day. It is Juneteenth. Go out and celebrate freedom. Very pleased that the federal government recognized this as a national holiday. I know there are a lot of events going on in the city and around in the county and around our donut county. So if you can, go out and celebrate. It's a very important day. Our guest today is Glenn Funk. If you were watching last week, I was in the backseat of a car heading to Cincinnati to go watch some baseball games. I am at home today, so hopefully it'll be a little smoother. Don't have to sit in the back seat. Glenn, welcome. I'm glad you're our guest today. How you doing?
Great to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So while we are letting people in, I usually ask some non-relevant question. Obviously, you didn't get the memo that this is very casual. It's just a give and take, and it looks like you were in your office this morning. Is that right?
I'm in my office. I was here working on some cases anyway, and knowing that I was going to be with this group, anytime I'm speaking in an official capacity, I always try to make sure that I respect not only the audience but the office. And so I know this is normally a casual Saturday morning event, but when we're going to be talking about some pretty serious issues, I wanted to make sure that I gave proper respect and dignity to the topics.
Well, thank you. Now you make me feel bad. I'm going to go in there and change. No, we try to keep this. Understand the importance of the topics. We try to keep it casual. It's just me and you talking. But you know what's been interesting, Glenn, over the last year or so that we've been to over a year is that a lot of people do get a lot of information out of this, and it's been interesting. I've learned a tremendous amount, and hopefully the people who have been on the show have actually learned a lot, not on the show, but people who are watching have learned just a lot about how the basics of Nashville work. And so anyway, that's what we're going to talk to you about. And you must have been watching last week or something, because you knew that I was in the backseat of a car.
I'm a huge, not only am I a huge Vice Mayor Schulman fan, I'm also a huge Sarah Fiegel fan, and I love the work that the Nashville Conflict Resolution Center does. And so I wanted to hear from her, and I could always listen to her talk about her work.
Wasn't that interesting? I didn't know so much about it. That's one of the benefits of this, Glenn, is that I learned a lot about what's going on in the city, things that I didn't really know. And I knew about her program, but I really did not know a lot about how it worked. And so she was great. It was really interesting to listen to her.
Right. She had an employee at Nashville Conflict Resolution Center I think she's just finished up out of Nashville School of Law. Her name's Danica Marsh, who I'm hoping to be able to recruit to become an assistant DA. She is a former police officer. She is in a wheelchair for the rest of her life because she responded to a domestic violence call, and the man came out angry and fired a gunshot at the victim, and it hit Officer Marsh dead. And so she's somebody who has literally given her all for the safety of the city, and she's a real treasure. And so, you know, after the police department, she's transitioned to working for the Conflict Resolution Center, and hopefully when she passes the bar, she's going to be an assistant DA. So keep your fingers crossed for me on the recruiting side, because she's a real treasure. And everybody that works, all the 200 volunteer mediators, that is a great group.
Well, and I know the officer. At least I've had a chance to meet her, I believe, but I know her story. And good luck to her. I hope the bar. I hope she passes the bar with no trouble. And good luck recruiting her. All right. So it is. We are ready to formally start. Today is June 19th. It's Juneteenth. As we said at the beginning, go out and celebrate freedom. And there are lots of activities going on today. Our guest today is our District Attorney General, Glenn Funk. Glenn, it's a pleasure to have you on. We have a number of people who have joined up. General Paul Summers, former Attorney General, the State Attorney General, is on the call. Councilmember Tanya Hancock is on the call. Councilmember John Rutherford is on the call. We'll announce other people who are getting on, or as they join us, elected officials. And we have a special guest that we haven't had in a while. The former comptroller of the state of Tennessee, Justin Wilson, is on the call. We are glad that he's here, and he usually, when he gets on the call, he gets the first question, which is, why is the former comptroller of the state of Tennessee better looking than our current district attorney general? Good luck with that one.
Yeah, well, Justin is an unbelievably handsome man, and we've been lucky to have him bless our state with not only his hard work and his intelligence, but his gifts of physical beauty. So I'm glad to have you here today, Justin, and thanks for that question.
Well, so General, I'm now seriously concerned about this interview. I understand the second part of your answer, but you called him, I think, a beautiful man. All right. So anyway, we'll just let that one go. I'm sure I'll hear from Justin at some point. So our first question usually to everybody, all our guests, is tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? And how did you get to become our DA?
All right. Well, I went to high school, Anderson, South Carolina, T.L. Hanna High School, public high school. From there, went to Wake Forest undergraduate, then to Ole Miss for law school. In the summers, when in law school, I clerked for George Barrett and Charlie Ray. Those of y'all in the legal community in Nashville know George Barrett was one of the premier civil rights lawyers, employment rights lawyers, community leaders. Charlie Ray was a criminal defense attorney and also an employment rights lawyer that was among the top lawyers in the whole state. While I was working here in the summers, I decided Nashville is where I wanted to be. Interviewed with General Tom Shriver, and he told me that when I graduated law school, as soon as I passed the bar, I'd get the first available job in his office. So when I graduated, I actually went to Memphis and worked in the public defender's office for a few months while I waited for a DA's job to open up, and moved here in January of '86. Prosecuted under Tom Shriver for the last 2 years of his time as district attorney. And then when he became a judge and Torrey Johnson became DA, I prosecuted under Torrey Johnson for 1.5 years. Before leaving the office, worked in private practice for 25 years, doing primarily criminal defense. And then when Torrey retired in 2014, I ran and was fortunate enough to be elected to be the district attorney.
So where are you originally from? South Carolina? Is that where you're from?
I was born in Williamsburg, Virginia. My dad, when he got out of World War II, he went to Caltech. Once he graduated from there, he got a job with Dow Chemical, and he never left the company. He was one of those guys that the company moved him around, but he never got another job. He was in management, chemical engineer, textile manufacturing. And so they moved him to Williamsburg, Virginia, to a plant there from California. And then when I was a junior in high school, freshman in high school, they moved him to South Carolina to a different plant. And then he lived there in Anderson all the way up until 2012, when I was able to get him to move here. And then he lived here from 2012 until he passed in 2018. So that's how we ended up in South Carolina, and that's how I ended up in Nashville.
Okay. All right. So for people who don't fully understand what the DA's office does, I think most people do, but generally, what's the office responsible for? And then tell us how many DAs currently does Nashville have, and maybe the volume of the caseload that you've got.
All right. Well, what a district attorney does, pursuant to the Constitution of the state of Tennessee, is represent the state in all criminal matters at the local level. The Attorney General's office then takes over at the Court of Appeals and in front of the Supreme Court, but we handle all cases from the time that they're charged through the General Sessions Court, through criminal courts, through a jury trial, through sentencing. So we're in charge of plea bargains. We're in charge of what cases to prioritize. We're in charge of what cases to dismiss, what cases to plea bargain, what cases to bring the full force of the state to try to make sure that the community is as safe as possible by actually trying to incarcerate somebody on some cases. So that's the charge. There are some prosecutors across the country who see the job as processing cases that the police department brings And that's the role, is to convict as many people and incarcerate as long as possible. There's another set of prosecutors across the country that look at the job a little bit differently. And that is that the job is to try to make sure that the community is safe as possible, but to also make sure that the system is fair, and to try to meet people where they are, to humanize victims and defendants alike, to make sure that we're understanding how a decision to prosecute and how to prosecute can impact entire communities, to see what we can do to give supports to folks. A victim comes in, two questions basically are, how were you hurt and what do you need? Well, you don't just need the person to get prosecuted. What you need is to feel safe in your house again, right? You need to be able to trust people that you're in relationship with. You need to make sure that you have supports, whether it's a mental health issue or whether it's a drug abuse issue, right? Let's see what we can do to help you, how you've been victimized and how you can be healed as much as possible. But then on the other side, what's the situation with the defendant? Is the defendant so dangerous that they need to be incapacitated? Do we need to put them in the penitentiary to make sure they can't hurt anybody else? Or what we're trying to do with our prosecution, an attempt to make sure we deter future conduct by that person or by the general public? Or are we trying to find a way to make sure that we rehabilitate an individual, somebody who might be engaged in domestic violence? Maybe they grew up in a home where dad beat mom and they think that's normal, and they've never had somebody tell them, no, you can't put your hands on somebody. You can't have a physical response in order to control a relationship. And so you need to get some counseling. You need to get some people talking to you about what the rules of society are and what the rules are that we expect each other to live by. And so, that's an example of rehabilitation. DUIs, you get alcohol treatment, see what we need to do in order to make sure that you address the issue, the underlying issue, not just the behavior. So that's what we're trying to do. We have 70 assistant district attorneys. We're handling a caseload that, because our police department is not making as many arrests for lower level crimes now, it's dropped from 100,000 charges a year down to about 60,000 charges a year. So we got 70 lawyers processing 60,000 charges. We have 6 criminal courts that are doing felonies, and so we'll have 5,000 to 6,000 violent felonies every year come through. The good news is, despite the fact that Nashville continues to grow, our number of violent felonies has stayed roughly the same. We're seeing more gun crimes, we're seeing more shootings, we're seeing more homicides, but the total level of actual violent crimes, the aggravated robberies, the aggravated assaults, the shootings, the kidnappings, the rapes, that's been fairly constant despite our growing population. The rest of the cases, the other 55,000, are usually handled in some form or fashion at the General Sessions Court. Those would be cases like simple possession of drugs, criminal trespass, simple assault, shoplifting, crimes that are not nearly as violent, though, obviously when we're talking about domestic violence, even if it's a misdemeanor, it's still an incredibly violent charge, because it impacts the safety and security of a home and a relationship. So those are the types of crimes that we deal with, and that's generally what the charge to our office is.
All right. So a lot of questions that come out of just what you said. So go back. So 100,000 typical down to about 60,000. Did I get that right? And
well,
out of the,
when Chief Surpass arrived, he was a big metrics guy. And so he told his officers, bring every charge you can. And so what had been, you stop somebody and might put 2 charges on them. Well, now all of a sudden it's a resisting arrest, evading arrest, assault on an officer, DUI, and criminal trespass. I mean, all of a sudden 5 charges when it used to be, assault on an officer and a DUI, 2 charges. And so we saw a great influx. He also established certain norms to where officers were expected to make a couple arrests every shift, and started kind of a situation where we were all about stats. In fact, he started a ComStat experience where every Friday the commanders would come and talk, and then to the commanders from across and leadership from the police department across the city. And basically they were asked, what are your stats? How many arrests? Arrests for what? Arrests for this crime or that crime? That continued on even after Surpass left. I have just recently gotten done talking to commanders across the city. We've got 8 precincts, and there's an assistant DA that, on top of everything else they do in their job and handling cases in court, they also serve as a liaison to a precinct, so that if there's an issue that comes up, like, hey, do we have enough for a search warrant, or can you help us brainstorm about this investigation, or we just made this arrest and it's the 3rd time this man's been arrested, but can you make sure that this case doesn't fall through the cracks? For whatever reason, we've got a liaison from our office to each one of the precincts. And every couple of years I go around with the liaison and I meet with leadership. And one of the things that I just got from my latest round of discussions with the commanders, I asked all of them, I said, tell me a little bit about the biggest change now that Chief Drake is the chief. And to a person, the commander said, the biggest change is ComStat, because now we don't come and give a bunch of statistics. We come to these meetings on Fridays and we're asked, what are your troubles? What are your trouble spots? What are your issues? And what do you need for support from the chief? So they're feeling, kind of a change in the direction of the wind, which is, let's target the violent crime. Let's try to make sure that we support individuals, and let's not be a police department that's just about statistics. And I think that's really healthy. I'm excited at the direction, and the commanders seem to be really excited about the support they're receiving from leadership in the police department.
Okay. The 5,000, I think you said 60 and 55,000 are general session stuff. The 5,000 more.
The major felonies and 54, 55,000 are usually handled in general sessions court.
All right. So you said something that I thought was interesting, and that is the number of crimes associated with guns has gone up. So you have a much broader perspective than a lot of us in terms of that. Why is that? Why would you say? I mean, I think I can guess, but why are we seeing more of that in terms of, do you all have a role in trying to understand, or at least seeing what's going on, kind of getting an understanding of what's happening out there in the community as to why we're seeing more crimes committed with guns?
Well, about 4 years ago, the legislature decided it was a good idea to say that you could carry a gun in your car even if you did not have a permit. It said that your car was an extension of your home. And so you didn't have to have a permit or training or a license to have a weapon in your gun. And we started to see a huge proliferation in our community, really across the state, with regards to weapon offenses. Now, of course, the legislature has made it to where, as of July 1st, you can carry a weapon and you don't have to have a license, even if you're just walking around town. The more weapons that we have, the more people who are armed, there's going to be more times that somebody, instead of just yelling at each other, ends up shooting somebody. I mean, when I was up at Madison Precinct a few weeks ago, they were talking about a road rage incident. Started out as nothing, and then some guy lost his mind and decided he was going to try to shoot the tires out of somebody else's car. Well, that might look great in a movie, but all of a sudden bullets started flying into the passenger compartment of the other person's vehicle. Proliferation of weapons is terrible. The other thing that's really causing problems is, once people get used to having a gun in their car, instead of being responsible, and when they get home at night, taking the gun out of the car and bringing it in and locking it up in a safe in their closet, they leave it in their car. And what we're seeing is children walking through parking lots and clicking door handles to see who left their car unlocked, and all of a sudden we're getting guns stolen out of a car at a tremendous level. And Judge Calloway's seeing this in juvenile court. Juveniles ending up with guns, and we're seeing it because juveniles sometimes are irresponsible, maybe don't understand how dangerous this is, maybe don't comprehend the sanctity of life or the permanence of death. And you got kids killing kids, not really on purpose, but by being reckless. And it is tough. And it's tough to meet with those families who don't understand, because it doesn't matter to them, whether it was an accident or whether it was intentional, whether it was an adult or whether it was another child. All they know is that they've lost this child that they've raised, and this 14, 15-year-old is now gone, and they're gone forever. So it is tough. It's not just juvenile gun violence. It's across the spectrum, all ages, all demographics, and it's something that You know, we take gun crimes very seriously in this office, but it's really time for the pendulum to start swinging back and get to where fewer and fewer people think they need to be carrying a weapon at all times.
Do you all, you know, obviously this gets into a national perspective, state legislature, the council has, they have limited authority in this. We should worry about these things because we don't want people getting hurt, and we want less people having gun crimes and things like that. What are there some efforts that you know of that are being done so that we can get maybe more of this in check, even with the laws that we have in place at this time?
Well, the handful of laws that we have in place, you know, we're taking gun crime very seriously. It's the policy of our office not to dismiss gun cases, and to make sure that those charges are pled to as they come through the court system, and look for sentencing where there's actual incarceration if it's a felon in possession of a weapon, if it's somebody who's prohibited from carrying a weapon. But there just aren't a whole lot of folks that are prohibited anymore. And since the Heller case about 11 or 12 years ago, the Supreme Court said that a city council can't ban weapons, right? I mean, we all watched Westerns where there was a sign, no guns allowed, and like the second scene of every movie, there's a standoff between the sheriff and the bad guy who walks into town, and the bad guy ultimately hands his weapons over only to get them back in scene 10 and then have a shootout. But, you know, I mean, I've never seen a Clint Eastwood movie yet where the bad guy looked at Clint Eastwood and said, well, I'll have my lawyer call you because I'm not giving my weapon up. Well, today that's what would happen. And that's the state of where we are with the interpretation from the Supreme Court, which is the law for what the Second Amendment means. And, you know, I think the answer is to try to de-escalate every situation and have police officers that are ready to try to de-escalate situations. But it's a dangerous time in our state right now.
Okay, so let's go to that last thing you mentioned. So somebody asked a question about the alternate policing unit. I know we're in a time where we're talking about de-escalation. We are talking about a mental health cooperation, and particularly in Nashville, the mental health cooperative, because council just put some money into that, and it's when it passed the budget on Tuesday. Generally, because there's a lot of issues with this, what are we doing in terms of your office working with the police, working with the mental health cooperative, to try to deal with more efforts to get some of these situations under control?
All right. Well, you brought up mental health, and so let me first go to that topic.
Okay.
You know, the sheriff tells us that 30% of his jail is folks with mental health issues that are probation violators. Makes sense. We have deinstitutionalized all folks with mental health issues, almost all folks with mental health issues. And we haven't put the proper supports in as a community or any of the communities across the country. And if someone can't, because of their mental health issue, obey the laws of Tennessee, they're going to violate the law, they're going to get brought to court. And if they then get put up just on a regular probation, well, if they can't live their lives in accordance to the law, how can we expect them to live their lives in accordance to the law plus the rules of probation? So they end up getting violated, and our jail is our largest mental health facility in the county. So Nashville has been trying over the last 7-8 years to really get in front of this issue. Melissa Blackburn, General Sessions Judge Melissa Blackburn, on top of doing all of her other duties and jobs of being a judge, she runs the mental health court, where she has a very hands-on approach to trying to make sure that folks who are on probation stay on their medications, don't get violated just because they got off their medications, try to intervene before other criminal activity happens, and has folks reporting in on a weekly, sometimes even daily report in to officers of her court, or even coming into court to actually visit with her personally every week. So that was a great first start. We also, when the sheriff built the new jail, the downtown detention center, he was able to carve out enough money to put another facility right next door, which is our behavioral care center. That is essentially a mental health facility. It looks like a mental health facility. The interior is a mental health facility. It is staffed by real professionals that are the folks from the mental health co-op who are contracted to Sheriff Hall. And the way it works is that an assistant district attorney shows up at 6:30 every morning, looks to see who is in jail from arrests the night before, sees if there are some offenses that can be diverted out of the system. Somebody walks into a McDonald's and does a mass shooting. Well, that would not necessarily be somebody that could be diverted out of the criminal justice system, but other folks, it really can be diverted. And so if they get screened by the mental health co-op and approved by our office, and the public defender meets with the individual and they want to engage in this diversion program, they go to this mental health facility and they stay there up to 30 days. Average stay is between 5 and 15 days. And at the end of that time, they've been stabilized. They get 30 days worth of meds. They've got a release plan. They're released not out to the streets, but to somebody's care. And they have 30, 60, 90-day checkup dates. I'm going to give you a real quick example of we just opened this thing in November. I got a call from a woman I'd been in law school with back in the 1980s. And she said, Glenn, this is Susan. I hadn't talked to you in a few years. I'm not practicing law anymore. I'm a school teacher now, and I'm calling you because I don't know what to do. Well, what's going on, Susan? One of my former students is the first person in her family that has been able to go to college. She's a freshman at one of the colleges in Jackson, Tennessee. She came home at Thanksgiving because of COVID. We had to do everything. She was going to have to do her exams online. And when she got back home, she did not get along with her mother's boyfriend. They got into an argument today, and she chased him around the apartment with a kitchen knife and then chased him outside with a kitchen knife until the police came and tackled her, arrested her, and now she's charged with aggravated assault and 3 or 4 other crimes. Total $16,000 bond. Nobody's got the money to make it, and she's charged with this felony that carries 3 to 15 years, and I don't know what to do. And I said, well, Susan, that doesn't really sound normal, chasing somebody around with a kitchen knife. Does she have any mental health issues? Well, I don't know. She had a counselor back when I had her in high school, so I don't know. I said, well, let me get her screened. And so she got screened. Sure enough, she did have a diagnosis. The district attorney then talked to the victim. What do you want? Do you want her incarcerated? Do you want her prosecuted for the felony, or do you want her diverted in mental health? Well, if she can get mental health, that's fine with me. Then she talked to the officers. They were supportive. Ultimately, she met with the public defender, agreed that, yeah, if she had a chance to get some help, that's what she wanted. She ended up staying 9 days in the behavioral care center. She got a fresh diagnosis. She got stabilized on new meds. She was discharged. Her case was dismissed. She had 30 days of meds in her pocket. She had a 30, 60, and 90-day check back date at the version of the mental health co-op in Jackson, and she had alternative housing until she went back to college. So she was able to go back to college instead of starting a cycle of, the next 30 days to 6 months being in jail, having a felony conviction, being on probation for 3 or 4 years, being in and out of jail, and being somebody that essentially would have had her future canceled and not really gotten a lot of real treatment. Instead, I'm proud to report that last month she completed her second semester of college, and she's doing great. So, I know that her future probably is going to have some bumps in it, but it's still bright. And we've saved a ton of money, and we've done the right thing by meeting somebody where they were. And at the same time, we've also supported the victim. So, we're doing that with the behavioral care center. But I don't really want to stop all the way there, because we got a mental health court, we got a behavioral care center. What we really need as a city is a broad range of services that can be applied, because every case is different, every individual is different. Many people on this call might remember about a month and a half ago, when somebody who had 200 arrests beat up a nurse in the parking garage of St. Thomas Midtown. And everybody was like, well, how could this happen? How could he have 200 arrests? Well, what happened was he has mental health issues, he has competency issues, and he has been held incompetent, never to become competent, which means we can't prosecute him, which means the court system can't really do anything with him. And so what do? What happens is he comes in and he gets processed out. This is a real problem. We went through, after that incident, Melissa Blackburn and I, along with members of the Mental Health Co-op and the Sheriff's Department and Roger Moore, the Deputy District Attorney, we've been working on this on a little bit of a task force to try to come up with some recommendations. How can we properly serve this community in a way to where they're not going to continue to victimize folks? These 229 individuals, their lives are not quality lives, and they are a real menace to the folks that they encounter. And we have been failing them, and we've been failing our community by having a situation where they're essentially caught and released over and over and over again. So, Vice Mayor, you will be getting a letter from us next week where we're going to propose the following. Currently, under state law, if someone commits a felony, they can be committed to Middle Tennessee Mental Health to get an evaluation done that lasts for 30 days. State pays for it. But several years ago, the state said, we're not going to pay for misdemeanors. And so we haven't sent any misdemeanors out to MTMHI. It's a cost thing. Doing the math, MTMHI has the bed space available. They've got like 100 beds available right now. Looking at the costs for 30-day stays, it would cost us probably about $2 million as these folks come through the system to send them out to Middle Tennessee Mental Health to see if there's ways that we can get them on their meds and get them in a situation where they can either become competent or at least become healthy enough and stabilized to where they've got a running start on being healthy. Now, we will need some further services at the end of that 30 days. Some people after 30 days, that might be enough. I don't know what that percentage would be. Would hesitate to even hazard a guess. There is a significant percentage that will also need some type of housing situation where they have supports in their housing, so they're not just released to the street to go back to the encampment or go back to Lower Broad, only to be rearrested again within a few days. So but we have the housing already in place in Nashville. There are places for folks to go if they have the means to be able to do that. Our best estimate is that's going to cost about $500,000 in the next year. So there's going to be an ask that comes from Judge Blackburn and from me together to the council and to the mayor's office. I know we've just passed the budget, but there's always some late additions to the budget to see if we could get a process in place where working between Park Center, Mental Health Co-op, the General Sessions judges, the DA, the sheriff, if we can identify those folks and be able to spend $2.5 million, which is a significant sum, but we can make the whole community safer, not just for these 229 individuals and the others that will undoubtedly show up in the next year or so, because that's the nature of this. But it's not growing exponentially, but it is growing as our population grows. But for $2.5 million, we can not only help these folks, but we can hopefully prevent any other nurses just trying to walk to their car at the end of their shift from being attacked in a hallway from somebody who's been arrested for 220 times. It would be a significant addition to this menu of services that we are trying to do to reach out to try to decriminalize mental health, but decriminalize it in a way that actually provides the supports where the community can be safe. So,
and how do you, in terms of all this, because there's a lot, I know about obviously some of this already. Maybe two parts to this next question. Watching the, in terms of the programs that you all are helping to implement, the success rate overall of how this works, and then maybe a subsequent question to that is making sure that even when people, if they agree to go to the behavioral health care center, if they go through a mental health program, that type of thing, how do we make sure that services continue even when they get out? Because I've heard the same statistics that you've heard from the sheriff's office about that revolving door of people who either have mental health problems or substance abuse problems, that, they come in, they get arrested, they go to jail, they're released, and they come in, they get arrested. You know, it's the same thing. And that's not what we want. We want people to get help, get better, to get the help they need so that we don't have that situation going on. So success rates, and then further programs available so that, you know, once they go through some of these programs, they continue to get help. Those are the two questions.
The Behavioral Care Center has only been open since November. We are tracking those. We're going to be able to have a recidivism report by the end of the year to have some kind of meaningful data. But, you know, we really need several years of reports to be able to know how successful we've been. We do have follow-ups because we get reports from the mental health co-op as to people, did they show up at the 30 day, the 60 day, the 90 day show up. I think we've had one individual so far go back out after completing the Behavioral Care Center and commit a new offense. But don't hold me to that number, because, but I think that's right. But like I said, this is so new in the process. I don't have a projection yet. Obviously, if we're going to make a $2.5 million ask, we are going to be tracking those statistics incredibly carefully. I heard someone say that criminal justice is about where medicine was in the 1600s. We've got a lot of anecdotal, and we don't have near enough statistics. We don't have near enough evidence-based practices. And so one of the things that we're doing as an office is trying to develop the statistics, figure out what's working, what's not working. If something's not working, we'll junk a program and start back from scratch or try to make amendments. But we're tracking statistics with regards to the Behavioral Care Center. We're tracking statistics with regards to our early intervention meetings for domestic violence. We're tracking our statistics with regards to the restorative justice program that we're working, that we've had in place now for 3 years. Knock on wood, we still have not had a single individual that has gone through the restorative justice program in juvenile court that has reoffended. That number is about 180 youth, and that's why we've been able to start slow and careful expansion of that program. We're also running at 100% victim satisfaction out of the restorative justice program in juvenile court too. But we've got to have the statistics to be able to come back and report to the folks that are the leaders in the community, like the council, like the mayor's office, report to the state legislature, and be able to see if some of the programs that we're doing in Nashville can actually be replicated across the state. So it's really important, and we're not going to ask for $2.5 million and then not give you a report back. We're going to make sure that we work with you and make sure that that what we're asking for is what we need.
Okay, so since we're on the topic of mental health, and I got a lot more questions, and we're going to have to ask you to come back because I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get to everything or not. But we just we had Amanda Brock from the Mental Health Cooperative on one of these calls. I think she's amazing. And she testified in front of the budget committee when the council, when we were looking at giving the Mental Health Cooperative more money. Tell us what you know about that, because that's an important piece too, as it comes to you in terms of a response to a call. Mental Health Cooperative goes out with the police. And then what can you tell us about how that's working and how you kind of deal with that from your office perspective?
There are many cases where it is really, really important, the steps that we have taken with the cooperation between the police department and the mental health co-op, where someone might be frustrated with a child or, you know, a partner or whatever, and they might be in crisis, but the answer is not even an arrest, right? The menu of options that needs to be available. And so by showing up out there, there are many times now that people who would have been arrested even a year ago are not being arrested now. And if that's what's necessary, that's exactly what, look, if you've got a parent, if you're a parent with a child who's 17, maybe even 18, maybe he's already an adult, and they're in crisis and you don't know what to do because you're afraid for themselves or you're afraid for yourself, and you call the police, you don't really want your child to have a criminal record. You don't really want to handicap your child for the rest of his or her life by having, you know, have to check the box on an employment application of, have you ever been arrested? That's not what you want, but what you really want is some help. right? I've gotten calls before. What can we do? Can the sheriff take him, but he not have a record? Well, no, we can't do that, right? The sheriff gets questions like that too. All 17 of our judges undoubtedly get those questions too. And what we've taken is that first step. Memphis has a mobile crisis unit that goes out, and that might be something we want to look at beyond just, kind of what we've got now with mental health co-op. But my dream is that we have this range of services where we can really, instead of what we used to have no instruments. Now we have a handful of instruments that don't always fit the exact situation that is presented to us. But if we get a broader range of services, then we're going to be able to handle this in a way that really helps families, really helps individuals.
Okay. Let me ask you a question that Pat Halper sent in today, which I think is really very relevant and very important. And that is, go back to the situation where your friend, the teacher, former lawyer, called you and said, what do I do? I'm lost. So the question is, this system can't work if everybody has to call you and say, I really don't know the DA, but I heard that story and I need help. How do we make it so that we all know that those resources are all available, so they're not having to, and this happens obviously everywhere. I mean, I get the same types of calls. It shouldn't be that way. So how do we make sure that in crisis situations where we don't want people to be arrested, but they may need help, or people see something going on, how do we get a better understanding to the citizens of Nashville? To know that there are alternatives and there are places to call? And that's a tough question.
Every time I have had a chance to speak, and the Behavioral Care Center has only been open since November, but every time I've had a chance to speak, I spread the gospel of this, right? I want everybody to know. But you also want it to reach, and so here we've got however many folks are on this and might watch the recording later, and so that'll be a great education. But I think what we really need is to where, whether we do like some communities and establish a 311 for a non-police related emergency, whether we continue to have an even more robust program where if you call 911 and report an incident, then the police might call the mental health co-op and show up out there together and then make a decision on whose lane is this in? Is it the police lane or is it the mental health co-op lane? It needs to be where whenever a citizen calls for help, the operator that gets that call can make sure that the right folks respond to that plea for help in a way that does not just dump in the lap of the criminal justice system every issue that we have with our family or our neighbors.
All right. So let me throw out an idea, and then we're going to switch topics because I'm watching my time. The idea would be, a lot of people on this call that have lots of connections, but obviously there's lots of groups out there, lots of not-for-profits that I think would find this really, really helpful. And so one of the questions or the ideas would be your office working with the public defender's office, reaching out to the Center for Nonprofit Management and calling in those respective groups. I mean, I know about Park Center, they already kind of are aware, but there are other groups out there that probably could use a basic primer in what is available out there. And, if they run into this situation, these are the different alternatives so that situations get addressed much earlier on than having to end up in your office.
Sure. I'm willing to host. I'm willing to participate. Anything that, let's get together this week and talk about who some of these target audiences might be. And let's put a plan in place to make sure that folks know what's available now and what we're hoping is going to be coming over the next year or two, what's on the horizon.
Great. All right. We'll talk this week. Okay. So I'm going to go to some of the questions that came in over the week. Just pick one. Prosecutor's discretion. So tell us what you can about that.
All right. Every prosecutor, every district attorney across the country has the discretion on whether or not to charge a case, whether to not charge a case, where to apply the resources of their office, in which particular areas to focus on. Prosecutor has the discretion to make a plea bargain or even to dismiss a case. Has the discretion to say, no, this is the case that I'm going to use the handful of jury trial dates to really fully prosecute and try to bring the full force of the law against this individual. It is one of the core principles that's built into our Constitution. We've had some issues where state legislators don't necessarily think that I should have discretion to make decisions based on what I think is important for our community, right? 3 years ago, we quit prosecuting driving on a revoked license, and instead, when somebody comes in to get booked and processed, instead of going to jail for driving on a revoked license, they meet with social workers that are housed in the sheriff's department, and they're given help to actually get their license reinstated. We used to put people in jail for 18,000, to the tune of 18,000 inmate days in jail a year for that. Now that's down close to zero. The only reason it's not all the way zero is if you're on probation for DUI and you get a driving on a revoked license, we still will prosecute that. So prosecutorial discretion is built into our system. It's really important. There's 31 elected district attorneys across the state. We have different styles, and our electorates are slightly different. Amy Wyrick in Memphis also does not prosecute driving on a revoked license, and she dismisses those cases. And Memphis has about 4 times as many revoked driver's license charges as we do. Another district attorney in East Tennessee made the decision that he was not going to prosecute mask violations and made a big public statement about that. He's got that discretion and decided that the resources of his office were best focused in other areas. So prosecutorial discretion is something that is really an important component of the job. I think we are all in agreement, all 31 of us. There might be some cases here or there that we might have a disagreement, but we're all trying to work to try to make sure our communities are safe, and all of us are focusing pretty much the great majority of our resources on the violent crime. But it is an important tool.
Okay. Okay. The next question. Talk about bail.
Sure.
And so we were getting questions in about, this may have some discretion as well, about recommendations. How does that work from your office in terms of, bail recommendations, and what is being done when, obviously, bail reform is a topic, about making sure that, when people say, well, the system is designed to keep poor people in jail. Talk about that.
All right. Well, the broader umbrella is criminal justice reform. And I've been working on criminal justice reform since my first day in office. I mean, I ran on a platform of, I know the difference between a bad person and a good kid in trouble. I took office in 2014. We immediately started working on trying to make sure we focused our resources on violent criminals, but tried to take the folks with the low level offenses and try to not use the severe sanction of incarceration unless we absolutely had to. So we have seen the sheriff's daily population of inmates reduced. With 2013, it was 3,150 inmates every single day. So far in 2021, it is 1,440, 60% fewer state inmates in the sheriff's facility. And how have we done that? Well, whether it's mental health, whether it's driver's license, whether it's not putting people on probation unless they need that support, whether it's being smart on which cases we dismiss, or whether it's bail reform. We've been working kind of a full court press to see what we can do to reduce the incarceration rate of Nashvillians to where now I think Memphis's incarceration rate is 297 people per 100,000, whereas ours is roughly 186. Murfreesboro, right next door, the incarceration rate's about 230 per 100,000, whereas we're 185, 186. Chattanooga is right about 280, 290. Knoxville is about 240. So we're being smart. We're using our resources, and we're trying to make sure that the community, the criminal justice system, brings the community together instead of being a wedge to drive it apart. Bail's an important part of that, and we've been working on bail reform really since 2014. We were able to get a grant. I worked with Dawn Diener to get a grant to have some alternatives to bail. What bail is our Constitution, written in 1871, guaranteed bail on all but capital offenses, because they didn't want to punish people with incarceration prior to their being convicted. And one of the reasons that passed is, remember what was going on in 1871, right? We were 6 years after the Civil War. Needed that because Black folks didn't want to get incarcerated and essentially re-enslaved because someone had taken out a charge. The folks that were the Confederate sympathizers or Confederates themselves, they remembered the prisoner of war camp from Andersonville and didn't want to be treated like that. And so everybody had a vested interest in making sure that, hey, you didn't just incarcerate somebody based on an accusation. So that's in our Constitution. Well, now the only capital offense, the only one for which you can get is first-degree murder. And so all offenses other than first-degree murder, you can get a bail. But what's bail about? Bail has two purposes. One purpose is to make sure that the person comes back to court. Committed an offense, I want to make sure you show back in court. If you don't show back up in court, you know what? Somebody's going to go back out there and arrest you. Okay? The other purpose to bail is, let's make sure you understand that we're serious about preventing crime. You don't just treat this in a flippant way, right? You don't commit 4 aggravated robberies, get arrested, and then you immediately get re-released, and you don't think we're serious about it, and you go out and commit 4 more aggravated robberies. So it's about safety to the community too. Right, so you got to look at who is a real danger to the community and who's likely to show up for court. Because if you're not a danger and you are going to come to court, then yeah, you ought to be out on bail for sure. One of the things that we have been working on is trying to make sure that we go back to those roots and really identify, well, let's make sure that anytime we set a bail, it is consistent with the state statute. And that those are the reasons why we're establishing the right amount of bail. Misdemeanors, we don't ask people to go to jail on misdemeanors. It is rare that we ask for a sentence of incarceration on a misdemeanor. And so one of the things that we were able to get in place about 2 years ago is that for misdemeanors, those folks get out of jail without having to post a cash bond. Starting 2 to 3 years ago in Nashville, that doesn't happen anymore, right? There are exceptions, but the exceptions are very limited. Domestic violence, DUI third, because you're a danger. If you're such an alcoholic that you've already been convicted twice of DUI, now you've gotten a third one, that's a danger. Or people who've been arrested twice within 7 days or 3 times within 3 months, right? Those folks, you know what, you're going to keep offending. We're going to have to hold you, or at least have you make a cash bail. On a given night, there's only 45 people in jail pre-trial. The sheriff takes a picture of his facility every night at 10 o'clock. That picture, pretty consistent, 45 pre-trial misdemeanors. Of those 45, 41, 42 of them will be replaced by a fresh 41 or 42 tomorrow, because within 24 hours, they're going to be released. So the pretrial, the nationwide issue with regards to pretrial detention, we've already addressed in Nashville. City of 750,000 people, to only have maybe 3 or 4 people held on a misdemeanor pre-trial, that's pretty strong. And the handful that are there are not going to be there longer than 10 days, because everybody has a right to a trial on a misdemeanor in front of a general sessions judge within 14 days, but we get those tried by the 5th or 6th day. On major felonies, that's a different analysis, because we do have to worry about public safety. We've got to have a balance there. There are those people that say, well, you know what, if a rich person can get out after committing 4 aggravated robberies, why can't a poor person get out? Well, you know what, if you've committed 4 aggravated robberies, I want there to be such a high bond that you can't get out and commit 4 more before we can get you tried and convicted. And so that's essentially up to a judge to determine what's the right amount of bail. And the judge can always order, you know what, I want to release you with just having conditions on your bail and not have a cash bail. The bail system of cash bail, yeah, it's not exactly fair. One of the thoughts behind it is to make sure that someone has an incentive to show up, and plus a bail bondsman, a bail company, a bail bondsman who makes the bail for you, and then you pay them a premium for posting their money to get you out. Then they have a monetary incentive to go find you and bring you back to court if you are the type of person who is either too irresponsible to keep up with your court date or are actively avoiding the court system, right? Dog the bounty hunter. Those are folks that are, he's trying to catch the people who have a serious crime that they're waiting for court. Court comes up, they decide not to show up for court because they don't want to have to run the risk they're going to be convicted and incarcerated. So they're on the run and staying with relatives or moving out of state, and the bounty hunter has to find them. Well, there are those individuals, and we've got a police department that has their hands full trying to deal with the issues that are happening today on June 19th. They don't need to be re-arresting folks that committed an offense last November who just decided they weren't going to show up for court. So it's a tough issue. It's one that we are continuing to work on and refine. We want to make sure that our system passes constitutional standards to protect the rights of the victim and the rights of the defendant, and try to reduce pretrial incarceration to the maximum extent possible. I've been working with Martisa Johnson. I've been working with the General Sessions judges. Judge Allegra Walker is in charge of some of these issues, and she has recently tasked me and our public defender, Martisa Johnson, to come up with a blueprint for any changes that we might want to our current bail practice. But it is important. We don't want to incarcerate folks pre-trial, especially not on cases where we're not going to be asking for incarceration post-trial. It's a really important topic, and it's something that a lot of folks in Metro government have been working really hard to try to get as close to right as possible. You're muted, Mayor.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we'll have to bring people back on this one. All right, so I think we have less than 2 minutes left. Quickly, kind of a general overview of where we are on body cameras.
Okay. We expect that by the end of the summer, all patrol officers in every precinct will have body cameras. That is producing an unbelievable amount of video that has to be reviewed. There are some jurisdictions that just says, you know what, once it comes in, then we'll give it out. The problem with that is it doesn't really protect the victims and the witnesses in a way that's appropriate, because if I cooperate with the officer and I say, yeah, I saw the guy that did that, that was Steve Ladd, and I know him, I went to high school with him, and here's what his car looks like. Well, if his lawyer gets that, then I might be put in danger. If I'm the victim of a home burglary and a police officer with a body cams in my, and I'm taking a tour, yeah, well, they burglarized here. Thank goodness they didn't find my safe, which was here. We're going to my kids' bedrooms, which are here. So the jurisdictions that just give all of the body cam footage away, that's just a recipe for sooner or later there's going to be a disaster. Other jurisdictions say, you know what, we're not going to give anybody the body cam footage, which essentially hurts the defendant's rights to have meaningful hearing and have their lawyer have all their information. We're just not going to give it to you. We'll give it to you after you're indicted, but like in Nashville, 90% of the cases get handled pre-indictment. So that's not acceptable. We have started a program where the district attorney's office gets it from the police department, and then we make it available in some rooms that the city has funded, so that defense attorneys can have access to it, can watch it, but can't get a copy of it, so that we don't have to worry about them giving it to a defendant's family and then have it posted on Facebook. But people can have the defendants can have their constitutional rights protected because their lawyer can actually see it. At the same time, we're protecting victims' rights and witnesses' safety as well. It's going well, but it is a tsunami of evidence, and we are working really hard to make sure that this video is reviewed, not only by our office, but by the defense counsel. And then once a case is finished, then it becomes open for a public record to where If folks want to track it, then, whether, statistics, how different folks handle different traffic stops, civil lawyers after a car wreck, those types of things, make sure that those can get available to them promptly. We also make sure that the Community Oversight Board has access to that video right away as well, because they're going to start, if a complaint comes up that's put in front of the Community Oversight Board, we want to make sure that we cooperate to the best extent, the most complete extent possible with the Community Oversight Board so that they can do their work.
General, you have a lot of stuff going on in your office and a lot of issues, and I appreciate you taking the time this morning. Lots of good questions from our viewers, so I was trying to keep up with that. At the same time, I didn't get through all the questions that came in this week. We may want to have you back, but the discussion is very relevant. And again, I just appreciate you taking the time to talk to everybody about this.
I love having this opportunity. I'll be glad to either come back to this, or you could organize another forum for, citizens like the folks on this call to be able to ask questions or hear more about it. I see Jan Bossing's on this call. She was one of my heroes when she was an assistant district attorney. She had a huge heart and ability to empathize, and she was somebody who I wish we could clone her and have 70 Jan Bossings in this office right now. She retired before I became district attorney, but it's good when I get a chance to run into her. And Jenny Charles is on this call too. She's our liaison to the Community Oversight Board. She's an assistant district attorney that handles major felonies up in Division 1 in front of Judge Steve Dozier. She has led efforts to work with folks that have had gun charges, and her leadership is really appreciated in our office. And I'm glad that Jenny was able to participate today too.
Yeah. So I know Jan and know Jenny, great people. Thank you again. I will tell our viewers that we are off for 2 weeks. We're taking 2 weeks off, and then we'll be back. So keep an eye on your emails. We'll let you know who our next guest is. Everybody be safe. Again, remember today is Juneteenth. Celebrate freedom. If you had a chance to go to some events, I would encourage you to do so. And again, everybody just enjoy your weekend and be safe.
And it's also still Pride Month, and I want to tell everybody to celebrate Pride Month as well as Juneteenth. It's really exciting to have been able to be present with this group on the first day of the Juneteenth was an actual official national holiday. So thank you.
Happy Pride, and everybody again, take advantage of the wonderful things that we have going on in Nashville that do celebrate lots of people. Everybody be safe. Again, thank you, General. Until next time, we'll see everybody. Okay, thanks.